Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Patty Giarrusso, and this is Let's Talk Pets on Society Bites Radio. Today, we welcome to the show Andrea Inman, and she's with Farmhouse Animal Nature Sanctuary, if I could say that right. And she also volunteers at a local shelter here that works with the guide dogs, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. And what we're going to talk about today is volunteer retention strategies. And while many organizations were rethinking their volunteer recruitment efforts even before COVID, that alone can't change the low volunteering rate many nonprofit animal welfare organizations are seeing today. And so we want to talk about methods to help retain volunteers and how you might go about getting some new ones. And Andrea is a lifelong animal lover and pet sitter, and she's worked in volunteer and kennel management for the past 5 years here in Florida. At a nonprofit that trains guide and service dogs for the visually impaired and veterans with disabilities. And they rely on about 300 weekly volunteers coming to their facility. And volunteering has always been an important part of her life since childhood. And she volunteers with local environmental groups for beach cleanups and is a certified volunteer Florida by Volunteer Florida for excellence in volunteer management. And she's attended the Global Volunteer Conference put on by Points of Light to continue her education. Her passions lie in building proper infrastructure for a successful volunteer program, volunteer appreciation and recognition, and coaching for success. And in her career, she's helped launch a better pre-screening process for the organization, a training program for incoming volunteers, continuing education opportunities for volunteers, has built a group volunteer program and a successful ambassador speaker program. She's a busy, busy person. And besides that, she's recently joined Farmhouse Animal and Nature Sanctuary, one of our local amazing animal sanctuaries, to volunteer with them. And she helps feed and clean every weekend. And she's now assisting that organization to help build their current volunteer program. And we love Farmhouse Animal and Nature Sanctuary. I don't know why I cannot say that today, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and they take in so many different kinds of exotic, domestic, and farm animals to give them better lives when they need them. So, welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you
And
for
is it,
having me.
yeah, and is it Andrea or Andrea?
It's Andrea, but
Andrea. Okay.
I get called Andrea so much. I also answer to that.
All right. Well, you sound like you're a very busy person and have done some great things for the volunteer organization at the other nonprofit where you work. And volunteer retention and even getting volunteers is so hard for animal welfare organizations. So, why don't you talk about what does a good volunteer training and recruitment program? First of all, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to remember that it's going to be a multifaceted approach. You can't just rely on just your website or just word of mouth, especially in this day and age with so many different age groups looking to volunteer at different organizations. You really want to reach them where the audience is. So a lot of that is on social media, trying to engage that younger demographic, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's really important to do that. It's also really important to advertise on websites like Volunteer Match. And there's so many websites that allow you to advertise your volunteer opportunities for free. So doing that and just taking advantage of it will really help you reach as wide of an audience as possible. But also that word of mouth. I mean, if you have a good volunteer program and your volunteers enjoy their time with you, they're going to talk about it. It's going to become a big part of their life. And, there's always a great opportunity, if possible, with your organization to do like bring a buddy program, whether it's allowing them to bring friends and family or loved ones to like one shift, or if you have like what we do with my organization is we do like lectures for continuing education, and we'll allow them to bring someone with them to kind of get people drawn into our organization. And hopefully either become a volunteer or a donor. Just get them while we can.
Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of the recruitment side of things. But with training, you really got to have a good foundation. And that means doing a lot of work up front, which can be hard if you're struggling already to get things done. But if you can end the cycle and just put a lot of work in on the forefront by, answering the who, what, where, when, and why questions that volunteers will have, like, where do I go when I come to volunteer? Where do I park? Who do I report to? How do I log my hours? What time do I show up? All of those kinds of questions before they show up. They're already going to feel more comfortable. But also having procedures and policies written and available to them, giving them time to shadow either staff, if you have paid staff, or other expert volunteers. And if you can or do have a facility they can get a tour of, giving them that before their first shift with you so that they can get more comfortable, and just any pre-anxiety things they worry about can kind of be alleviated.
Yeah. And, talking about different types of nonprofit organizations, you are talking pretty specifically about brick and mortar
Yes.
organizations. Yeah. And, a lot of other ones, and it's probably a whole other story or a whole other interview to talk about volunteer organizations that are more online.
Yeah,
where
definitely going to be different.
Yeah.
You have to do a lot of things, whether video trainings, and getting, even if they're like 10 to 15-minute video trainings, or even emails, honestly, putting all that information into like an introduction email. If it's a remote organization, will go a long way.
Yeah. Because that's harder. I think it's harder for people, to do that type of thing. I know how you mentioned getting the work up front done in the training. When you're so busy and you have so few volunteers, it's kind of like a tough cycle of how to get that done. I mean, I had somebody just the other day ask me, could my wife would like to volunteer. And I said, I'm so busy. I don't even know how to help her know what to do, and it's so hard in cases like that, so I don't know that there's any kind of simple answer.
Yeah, there's not. I will tell you, I'm a person that tries to find the most efficient way to do anything. So I will literally try to set aside 10 minutes to write just a template email for emails I frequently send. So I can just copy and paste and switch out, dates and times that will change. So if you want to build something like that, just set aside 10 minutes. Okay, what's anything they'll need to know? And so when you get those questions, you can say, you know what, great, what's the email? I'll just shoot it off and change the pertinent information. And that way, it's only 10 minutes that you spent doing that, but it helps you for so much longer. You're not typing out the emails repetitively, and you just have that in your bank. And you can even give it to other people who might be able to answer those questions for you, whether it's another volunteer who's willing to send emails and answer emails for you, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because it happens a lot when you're trying to train new people that they do ask the same kind of questions. So doing something like that, just literally taking 10 minutes and doing it, that's a great idea. And thank you.
You're welcome.
So talk about the differences. How are volunteers different than a paid staff? It seems obvious, but it might not be.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people, the first thing that's going to come to mind is that, staff are getting paid and volunteers don't get paid, money. So it might be very quick to say, oh, well, we'll just, say thank you. And we'll, at the holidays, give them like a gift card or throw a celebration when, things are more normal, and we can do that. But it goes a lot deeper than that. And I actually think that volunteers are pretty much the same with staff, in the regard that they want and crave the same types of things that a staff member is going to have when they get employed with someone. And you need to have the same foundation for your volunteers that you do have for staff. So it's more than just saying thank you to the volunteers, even though that does go a long way and that's like a good first step. It really means giving them a good experience, and a good experience for staff is going to be very similar to what it means to be a good experience for a volunteer. So, having that good communication and structure, if they show up to volunteer brick and mortar or online and so much has changed and they weren't communicated about to those changes beforehand, they're going to feel stressed out, and you don't want them to associate volunteering with stress, right? Like that's the opposite of what you want.
Right.
So feeling valued, having clear expectations of what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing, and then feeling their time is well utilized. That's a big thing. I think a lot of organizations will, they crave need and they need the help so bad that they'll just take and take and take. But they don't spend the time to really analyze, because maybe they don't even have the time, about, okay, well, if I bring 10 people in, how quickly is this work going to get done versus just having 2 people do it? Obviously, the more people there are, the more quickly it's generally going to go. And then if people are driving to a brick and mortar place and spending an hour drive, like with Farmhouse, we're about 30 to 35 minutes away from the interstate. So if you're driving from the interstate, that's fine, but it might be 30 plus more minutes for you just to get on the interstate. If you're going to show up somewhere and drive an hour, you want to probably spend at least an hour there doing something, because if you drive an hour to spend 30 minutes, you're going to be spending more time driving than actually helping, and that will get really frustrating.
Yeah. I like this conversation because I'm writing all kinds of notes while you're talking. It's like a little class.
Yes.
So talk about how you identify a good fit for a volunteer with an organization. How do you go about that? Because it's hard. I mean, I've got people saying, I'd like to help you, but it's hard to know. You can ask certain questions, but it is hard to know.
Yes, absolutely. And especially when you talk to them and they're so nice and they feel they really want to help, sometimes that's not enough. And maybe they'll be a better fit to help your organization in another way than to volunteer, whether it be in the specific role they're applying for, I should say, because there's so many different ways you can volunteer. And again, I'm going to say you really do have to spend the time and set aside the time to look and identify at your organization's needs and make sure you're clearly communicating that on your website. And you have to be honest too, because I see, especially with animal organizations, they sometimes feel the need to hide the dirty work. But that's a lot of what volunteers will likely be doing. You don't want to pretend that they're not going to pick up poop if they're going to pick up poop.
That's right.
And, I can't tell you the amount of times with the organization I work for with the dogs that, people think they're going to come play with dogs all day. And they're shocked to learn that that's not at all what they do, because there's so much that goes into caring for dogs. And it's not just playtime. So just making sure it's upfront, like, okay, you're going to be bending and stooping. You're going to be picking up poop, things like that. Being upfront about it is really important, because clear communication is the best thing you can do, so that you get the right people even applying to be a volunteer. And then when they get to your application, that's kind of be what I would call your next line of defense, if you will, to kind of get and gather more information about your applicant. So maybe you have someone who applies, but they can only do it on the specific day of the week at the specific time of day, or